Stay away from her. She's difficult. The manager whispered those 6 words to every new person who walked through our department doors. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet warning, delivered with a concerned expression, like she was protecting them from something dangerous. And they believed her. Every single one of them believed her, without question. For 8 months, I watched her repeat this ritual. 8 months of watching people look at me, then look away. 8 months of being the woman nobody wanted to know. The words weren't sharp like a knife. They were slow like poison, spreading through every conversation I'd never be part of, every project I'd never be invited to join, every moment of belonging I'd never experience. And the worst part? I let it happen. I had to let it happen. Because what they didn't know could either save them or destroy them. And I was the only one who could decide which. Before we go any further into what happened next, I need to say thank you. Thank you for being here, for listening to something that most people would scroll past. If this story means something to you, if you feel what I felt, please hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me if you've ever been the person everyone was warned about. And subscribe, because stories like this need to be heard. Now let me tell you who I really am. My name is Celeste. Not the kind of name that blends into a crowd, which is funny, because blending in was exactly what I needed to do. I'm 41 years old, and I've spent the last 17 years studying something most people don't think about until it's too late: workplace ethics. Not the boring kind they teach in corporate training videos. The real kind. The kind that shows you exactly how good people end up doing terrible things without even realizing it. I've interviewed thousands of workers, from janitors to executives, and I've found patterns. Patterns that repeat in every industry, every country, every type of organization. 3 years before any of this started, I published a textbook about those patterns. It wasn't supposed to become famous. It was just supposed to document what I'd learned. But universities started using it. Training programs built entire courses around it. Regulatory agencies began referencing it when they investigated companies. And suddenly, my name meant something in professional circles. My maiden name, that is, the name I published under, the name I'd built my reputation on. When I got married, I took my husband's surname, not because I believe in tradition, but because it gave me something valuable: anonymity. I could walk into any workplace and nobody would connect me to that textbook, to those interviews, to the woman who'd spent nearly 2 decades documenting how organizations fail their people. And that anonymity meant I could see the truth, the real truth, not the polished version people show researchers, the messy, complicated, everyday truth that only emerges when nobody knows they're being watched. So when I decided to write a second book, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I needed to work inside a typical organization, not as a consultant, not as an observer, as a regular employee, someone unremarkable, someone who could see everything without changing anything. I found a mid-sized firm that handled client services for various industries. Nothing glamorous, nothing terrible, just ordinary. The kind of place where most people spend their careers without anything dramatic happening. I applied for a position handling client complaints and employee concerns. Basic work, necessary work. The kind of work that gives you access to every crack in an organization's foundation. During my interview, I met with the director first, Roderick, a man in his late 50s who'd built the organization from 8 employees to nearly 200. He understood immediately what I wanted to do: research, observation, documentation. He approved it without hesitation, with one condition: I would tell my direct manager, and only my direct manager. She would know who I really was, and she would help facilitate my work. He introduced me to Paulette, the woman who would supervise my daily tasks. Mid-40s, impeccably dressed, with a smile that seemed warm until you looked at it too long. I explained my project to her in his office, with him sitting right there. She nodded enthusiastically. "Your secret's safe with me," she said. "This will be valuable research for everyone." I shook her hand. I thanked her. I started the job 2 weeks later, excited about what I might learn. The first week was normal. People introduced themselves. They explained processes. They invited me to lunch. I felt welcomed, accepted, like maybe this would be easier than I thought. But during week 2, something shifted. Conversations stopped when I approached. People who'd been friendly suddenly seemed busy whenever I had questions. The group chat that had been active went silent every time I opened it. At first, I thought maybe I'd made a mistake, said something wrong, done something inappropriate. I replayed every interaction in my mind, searching for the moment I'd ruined things. But there was no moment. There was just the slow realization that I was being erased from the social fabric of the workplace, and I couldn't figure out why. Month 3, I figured it out. I was in the break room, slightly earlier than usual, when 2 new hires walked in talking. They didn't see me at first. "Did Paulette talk to you about Celeste?" one asked. The other nodded. "Yeah," she said, to be careful. "Said Celeste doesn't work well with others, that she causes problems." They noticed me then. The conversation died instantly. They grabbed their drinks and left. I stood there holding my reheated lunch, understanding flooding through me like ice water. Paulette wasn't keeping my secret. She was using it. Or rather, she was using me. She'd figured out that having a workplace ethics expert embedded in her department was dangerous. I could see everything she did wrong, every shortcut, every violation, every moment she prioritized her own convenience over proper protocol. So, she'd done the smartest thing possible. She'd isolated me completely. If nobody trusted me, nobody would listen to me. And if nobody listened to me, nothing I observed would matter. The isolation wasn't random. It was surgical. Paulette assigned me every task that gave me visibility into problems, without giving me any power to fix them. I handled sensitive client complaints, the ones where clients threatened legal action or public exposure. I processed confidential employee concerns, reading reports about harassment, discrimination, safety violations. I reviewed financial discrepancies flagged by other departments, seeing exactly where money went missing or got misallocated. Every single task was a window into something broken, and every single task was mine alone. Nobody collaborated with me. Nobody checked my work. Nobody asked my opinion. I was simultaneously seeing everything and influencing nothing. The weekly team meetings became a special kind of torture. Paulette would spend 30 minutes praising everyone's contributions. She'd highlight projects, celebrate wins, acknowledge effort, everyone except me. When she assigned new projects, she'd distribute them to people with half my experience, right in front of me, explaining why each person was perfect for the work. High-profile clients went to someone who'd been there 3 months. Complex analysis went to someone who'd never done it before. Strategic planning went to someone who openly admitted they were guessing. And I sat there, silent, because speaking up would only confirm what everyone had been told, that I was difficult, that I caused problems, that I didn't play well with others. "Don't take it personally," a coworker named Vera told me one afternoon. We'd both been washing our hands at the same time, an accidental moment of proximity. "Paulette warned us you don't collaborate easily. It's not about you as a person. It's just your work style." She said it kindly, like she was trying to help, like she thought I didn't know. I dried my hands and thanked her, because what else could I do? Tell her the truth? Explain that I'd literally written the textbook on collaborative leadership? That would sound insane, defensive, exactly like someone difficult would sound. So I kept working, I kept watching, I kept documenting, because here's what Paulette didn't understand about research. Isolation is sometimes the best vantage point. When you're not part of the social dynamics, you see them more clearly. When people forget you're there, they stop performing. They show you who they really are. And what I saw, day after day, was an organization slowly poisoning itself with small violations that nobody thought mattered. A manager who changed client agreements without documentation. A team lead who approved expenses that clearly violated policy. A supervisor who ignored safety reports because fixing them was inconvenient. None of it was dramatic. None of it was evil. It was just careless. Careless in ways that would eventually hurt real people. Month 8 brought Shiloh, 26 years old, fresh from graduate school, hired to handle client onboarding. She had this energy about her, like she was genuinely curious about everything. She asked questions during meetings, good questions, questions that made people think instead of just respond. She noticed things others missed, and on her 3rd day, she noticed me. I was working through a client complaint when she appeared beside my workspace. "Why does everyone avoid you?" Direct. No preamble. Just the question. "You'd have to ask them," I said, not looking up. "I did. They said you're difficult." She paused. But I've been watching you for 3 days now. You helped 4 different people solve problems they were stuck on. You caught an error in the client database yesterday that would have cost us a huge account. You stayed past 7 last night, finishing someone's report because they had a family emergency. None of that seems difficult to me. It seems like the opposite. I finally looked at her. Really looked at her. She wasn't trying to be nice. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She was just confused. Genuinely confused about why reality didn't match what she'd been told. "What's really going on?" she asked. I wanted to tell her, wanted to explain everything, but the truth sounded impossible, so I just shook my head. "It's complicated." She studied me for another moment, then walked back to her workspace. I thought that was the end of it, just another person who'd tried to understand and given up. But 15 minutes later, she packed her bag and left the building. It was only 2 in the afternoon. People don't just leave in the middle of the day unless something's wrong. I watched her go and felt a strange tug of worry. Had I said something that upset her? Had my silence somehow made things worse? Turns out, she hadn't gone home. She went straight to the building where our director worked, 3 blocks away. Shiloh walked right past reception, took the elevator to the 4th floor, and knocked on Roderick's door. He'd just returned from 7 months of international travel, expanding partnerships in different regions. He barely knew most of the recent hires, but he remembered approving my research arrangement before he left. He remembered exactly who I was and why I was there. Shiloh didn't waste time with small talk. She pulled out her phone and showed him what she'd found during those 15 minutes at her workspace. She'd searched my full legal name from the company directory, my married name. But search algorithms are smart. They connect dots. They find patterns. And within seconds, her screen filled with my other name, my published name, the name attached to 17 years of work. She showed him my textbook, the one that had been assigned reading in her master's program last semester. She showed him my speaking engagements, my credentials, the awards from professional ethics organizations. She showed him my university profile, where my current research project was publicly listed, systemic compliance failures in mid-sized organizations, a case study approach. And then she told him 3 things that changed everything. First, I was being deliberately isolated by my direct supervisor. Second, she'd personally witnessed 6 ethics violations in just 3 days that matched patterns from my published research. Third, if I was still gathering data after 8 months, the company was probably in serious trouble. Roderick listened to all of it without interrupting. Then he made 3 phone calls. One to his assistant, scheduling an emergency leadership meeting for that evening. One to me, requesting my attendance. And one to Paulette, informing her that her presence was mandatory. I got the call at 4:30. Roderick's voice was calm but firm. "I need you at a leadership meeting tonight. 6 o'clock. Conference space on the 4th floor." He didn't explain why. Didn't give me time to prepare. Just hung up after I agreed to come. I sat at my workspace feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Fear. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I knew what was coming. The reveal. The confrontation. The moment when 8 months of careful observation would either vindicate me or destroy me. I arrived at 5:50. The conference space was smaller than I expected, with windows overlooking the city and chairs arranged around a rectangular setup that fit maybe 12 people. Roderick was already there. So was his assistant, the head of human resources, the chief financial officer, 2 senior team leads I'd never met. And Paulette, she sat at the far end, her expression carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew something was happening. She just didn't know what. When I walked in, her expression shifted, just for a second. Surprise mixed with something else. Maybe anger, maybe fear. "Why is she here?" Paulette asked Roderick. "She's not leadership. She's here because I invited her," Roderick said simply. He gestured for me to sit. I chose a chair near the middle, not too close to anyone. Shiloh entered a moment later, looking slightly nervous but determined. She sat near Roderick, clearly his ally in whatever was about to happen. Roderick started without preamble. "Celeste, I understand you've been conducting research during your time here. Research I approved 8 months ago. Can you update us on what you've found?" The room got very quiet. Everyone except Roderick and Shiloh looked confused. Paulette looked like she'd swallowed glass. This was the moment I'd been preparing for since I started. The moment where I could either burn everything down or build something better. I documented violations. I had names, dates, specific incidents that violated not just company policy, but actual regulations. I could end careers right there, could justify every lonely lunch, every ignored contribution, every whispered warning about how difficult I was. Instead, I said, I've found enough material for 3 chapters of my next book. Would you like to hear them? Wait, Paulette interrupted. What research? What book? What is she talking about? She looked at Roderick. You approved this? I did, Roderick confirmed. Before I left for my overseas work, I thought I'd briefed you. Perhaps that conversation got lost in the transition. He hadn't briefed her. We both knew it. He'd told her directly, in his office, with me sitting right there. But he was giving her an exit, a way to claim ignorance, instead of admitting deliberate sabotage. She didn't take it. This is exactly why I warned people about her, Paulette said, her voice rising slightly. She's been spying on us, collecting information to use against us. This whole time she's been pretending to work, while actually, I've been working, I said quietly. Every task you assigned me, every complaint you had me handle, every concern you asked me to process, every discrepancy you told me to review, I completed all of it, on time, accurately, and yes, I learned from all of it. That was the point. The point, Paulette said slowly, was to trap us, to document our mistakes, so you could expose us. No, I said. The point was to understand how typical organizations function when nobody's performing for observers. You knew that 8 months ago when Roderick introduced us. Her face went pale. She'd forgotten that detail, forgotten that she'd been part of the original conversation. She tried to recover. I thought you were just observing general patterns, not collecting evidence. I don't collect evidence, I said. I observe patterns. There's a difference. Roderick leaned forward. What would you recommend, Celeste? Based on what you've observed. This was it, the fork in the road. I could recommend investigations, audits, terminations. I could present my findings as a prosecutor presents a case, or I could do what I'd actually spent 17 years learning to do, teach. I recommend education, I said. A comprehensive training series, 6 sessions, 2 hours each, covering the most common ethics violations I've observed across multiple organizations, including this one, delivered by me, using real scenarios from my research. No names, no accusations, just patterns and solutions. And if we agree, Roderick asked, then I'll make sure this organization becomes a success story in my book, not a cautionary tale. The room went silent again. The CFO spoke first. That sounds like a threat. It's a choice, I corrected. Every organization I study makes it into my book. How they're portrayed depends on how they respond when they discover their patterns. Some choose defensiveness. Some choose learning. The ones who choose learning become examples other organizations want to follow. Paulette slammed her hand on the table. Not loudly, just firmly. You can't blackmail us into compliance. I'm not, I said. I'm offering you what I offer everyone. The chance to fix problems before they destroy people. You can accept that or not. Either way, my research is complete. Roderick looked at Paulette. You told me 8 months ago that Celeste was a perfect fit for our team. What changed? She didn't answer, couldn't answer, because nothing had changed except her fear of what I represented. Someone who could see through every performance, every excuse, every shortcut. Someone who knew exactly what those shortcuts cost. The training sessions started the following week. Mandatory attendance. Every employee, every manager, every leader. 6 sessions spread across 3 weeks. I didn't mention the company by name during the sessions. Didn't reference specific people, just presented scenario after scenario, each one pulled directly from what I'd observed. Here's a pattern, I said during session 1. A leader isolates someone knowledgeable because that person's expertise might overshadow the leader's authority. The leader frames this isolation as protecting the team from someone difficult. Over time, the team loses access to valuable knowledge, performance drops, and the leader blames the isolated person for not contributing. This pattern appears in 38% of the workplaces I've studied. People shifted in their chairs. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked at Paulette. She sat in the back, arms folded, expression blank. Session 2 focused on complaint handling. Organizations often assign complaint processing to trustworthy people, then ignore those complaints because leadership assumes if they were serious, the trustworthy person would escalate. But that person has been labeled as someone who overreacts or causes drama, so their escalations get dismissed as exaggeration. Meanwhile, legitimate problems grow until they explode. This pattern appears in 62% of the workplaces I've studied. After that session, 3 people approached me privately. They asked if they could discuss specific situations, real situations they were currently facing. I listened. I didn't give advice, just asked questions that helped them think through their options. Word spread. By session 3, I had a waiting list of people who wanted to talk. Session 4 covered financial discrepancies. Session 5 covered safety violations. Both sessions presented patterns without accusations. Both sessions led to private conversations with employees who'd been seeing problems but didn't know how to address them. And through it all, Paulette sat in the back, getting smaller. Session 6 was different. Roderick attended personally, sitting in the front. The entire leadership team came. I'd saved the most important pattern for last. Here's the pattern that underlies all the others, I said. A leader who deliberately suppresses talent to protect their position eventually creates a culture where talented people leave, performance drops, and the organization fails. This isn't about intention. Most leaders who do this believe they're protecting the team from disruption. They believe they're maintaining stability. But what they're actually doing is preventing growth, and organizations that don't grow eventually die. This pattern appears in 79% of failed organizations I've studied. I paused. Let that number sit. 79%, not a small sample, not an outlier, nearly 4 out of 5. The question, I continued, isn't whether a leader intended harm. The question is whether the organization will learn from the pattern before it's too late, because talent leaves. It always leaves. The only question is whether it leaves quietly or loudly. Paulette stood up in the back. Everyone turned to look at her. She didn't say anything, just gathered her materials and walked out. The session continued without her. We finished the final scenario. People asked questions, real questions, questions about how to recognize these patterns in themselves, how to change, how to build cultures where these patterns couldn't take root. The next morning, Paulette submitted her resignation, effective immediately. No farewell email, no goodbye tour, just a brief letter to Roderick stating she was pursuing other opportunities. Nobody demanded it, nobody forced it. She just finally understood that staying meant being the unspoken subject of every future conversation about what not to do. Roderick offered me her position, department manager, full authority, significant raise. I declined. My research was complete. I had everything I needed for the book. Taking her job would have felt like revenge, and revenge was never the point. But I did accept a different role, permanent ethics advisor, part-time, remote, essentially a consultant who could review policies, observe patterns, and provide guidance when needed. Enough involvement to ensure the changes stuck, not so much that I became part of the system I was studying. The consequences rippled outward in ways I didn't expect. Shiloh was promoted to team lead within a month. She demonstrated something rare, the courage to ask questions when everyone else accepted answers. She transformed the department in ways Paulette never could. She instituted weekly knowledge-sharing sessions where anyone could present what they were learning. She created transparent project assignments where everyone could see who was doing what and why. She built exactly the kind of collaborative environment that makes my research obsolete. Other departments started requesting similar training. Roderick approved it. Over the next 4 months, I delivered modified versions of those 6 sessions to every team in the organization. Each time, patterns emerged. Each time, people recognized themselves and chose to change. Not because they were forced, because they understood the cost of staying the same. My book publishes next month. Chapter 7 features this organization, not as a failure, not as a villain, as proof that organizations can choose learning over defensiveness, as evidence that patterns can be broken when people decide truth matters more than comfort. I used real scenarios from my 8 months there, real patterns, real solutions, but no names, no identifying details. just the story of how one organization looked at itself honestly and chose to become better. The advance copies went out last week to reviewers and early readers. One of them emailed me yesterday. She teaches organizational psychology at a university. She's assigning my book for her spring semester, and she specifically highlighted Chapter 7 as the most important case study she's encountered in 20 years of teaching. This, she wrote, is what transformation actually looks like. Not dramatic, not sudden, just steady, honest work. I forwarded that email to Roderick. He responded with 2 words, "Thank you." Paulette found work at another organization. I know because someone from my professional network mentioned seeing her name on a leadership roster. I don't know if she learned anything from what happened. I don't know if she recognizes patterns in herself now. I hope she does. I genuinely hope she does, because the point was never to punish her. The point was to show everyone, including her, that there's a better way. Last week, I visited the office for a quarterly check-in. People greeted me by name, asked about my research, told me about problems they'd solved, using frameworks from the training. And Shiloh pulled me aside to share something that made the entire 8 months worth it. "We hired someone new," she said. "And on their first day, I sent a message to the whole team. I told them questions are always welcome here, especially the difficult ones." She paused. "That came from you. From watching you sit alone for months, asking difficult questions nobody wanted to hear. Thank you for teaching us that difficult doesn't mean wrong." I think about those 6 words often. Stay away from her. She's difficult. Paulette meant them as a warning, as a way to protect herself from accountability. But in the end, they became something else entirely. They became proof that the most important voices are often the ones people try hardest to silence. And the most valuable work often happens in isolation, where truth doesn't have to perform for comfort. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the person everyone was warned about, or if you've ever been the person doing the warning, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment sharing your experience. Hit that like button if you believe organizations can change. And subscribe, because these stories matter. The difficult ones, the uncomfortable ones, the ones that show us who we are and who we could become. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And thank you for believing that truth is worth the cost of being difficult.